Hello everyone, it's that damn Pipsqueak bringing you some coverage of Grand Prix Jakarta from the MSEM format. So we're two turns into BluesEclipse versus Augur here. Augur is playing Abzan Toolbox mid-range, and BluesEclipse is playing kind of MonoBlack Aristocrats style deck. Blues started off with a turn 1 Shikai Revenant into a Stolen Secrets, I believe. Duress, plus second Shikai Revenant, taking a Pith Wilt from Augur. And Augur has simply continued ramping and played a Anomalion, which is going to be pretty effective on this board, since a 3-3 generally beats 2-1s. Augur is taking a bit of damage from this substratum, has taken 2 damage so far from it, and I believe also had to take, 2 damage from an Amber Hills. So, not ideal technically. Blue's playing out a third Shikai Revenant. End step is going to pick up the one that just died. So, there's some decent aggression going on here, but if Augur is able to turn the corner via an Ayala's Concord, tutoring up, some merciful Yoruda style 3-drop, this board could get locked down pretty quick, and BluesEclipse has very limited reach. His deck does have access to Agonizing Punishment, I believe the card is called, which is the new spell from Survive the Night, one of the newest sets, which is kind of like a fling. It's you sacrifice a creature and pay 2 mana, and you torment an opponent 3 times. And torment is the mechanic from Hour of Devastation that wasn't keyworded, where they lose 3 life unless they sacrifice a non-land permanent or discard a card. So far, this is the 1-1 bracket. Both of these players won their first round, lost their second round. Augur losing to myself on Podlight Manifesto, and BluesEclipse losing to Egg on Esper Flash. Mapumo here is great, because in addition to killing one of the creatures, it'll gain Augur some life in the process. Anyway, both these players are still fighting for redemption. This is the biggest GP we've ever had, and some number of people who are 3-1 will make it into the top 4. So, both these players really want this win. And then if they win this, they'll need to win the subsequent match to get in. End step is going to play a Menin pack from Lovie Awakened. This is a card that's kind of low power on its own, but when combined with Agonizing Punishment is incredibly effective. So BluesEclipse deck is running several of these kind of individually low quality cards that are fine at a pinch. Menin pack is a flash 1-1 that kind of 2-for-1s your opponent, and it also deals the damage when it enters. Not a bad card by any means, but it's definitely lower power on average than Departed Evangel, which the deck also runs. But when combined with Agonizing Punishment, they get significantly scarier. Gassing back up here with Honorless Offering means that BluesEclipse is technically pulling ahead in the card advantage race. But as I mentioned, this board is getting gummed up, and that's kind of exactly what Augur wants to do, is slowly lock down the board, and then once the board is locked down, just slowly turn around and throw down some large threats that take over the game quickly. Blues looks to not even be trying to kill Mapumo, just swinging in with the Shikai Revenant and Menin pack. If Augur blocks the Menin pack, they'll have to discard a card. But if she blocked the Shikai Revenant, the Shikai Revenant would pop back up at the edit chart, so it's not a great deal. Oh, and discards a Starbane Elemental, which is kind of interesting. That card is usually good versus these aggro decks, but I suppose Augur has identified that, board presence is so important that a board wipe isn't where she wants to be right now. Blues is up to 2 Shikai Revenants in play and the third one in hand. Mapumo can keep sniping those off and gaining life in the process. This card is just so hard to fight against if you're a deck that relies on 1 toughness creatures. It's sniping Mana Dorks is annoying, it's sniping 2-1s is really rough, and so on. Alright, second basic has now neutralized the Resplendent Substratum, so that's good. Augur is not going to be taking any more damage from her mana base, and now has this steady source of life gain. I would not be shocked if, and I assume this is going to be an Ayala's Concord, finding Merciful Yoruda, probably. And Augur is going to just try to, yep, start turning the corner. So probably swing in with the 3-3, um, and then can actually next turn move over the counters from the Anomalion onto the Merciful Yoruda, and just six ball blues down over the course of two-ish turns. Exactly two turns, actually, if Mapuma goes face. So Blues' deck only runs 18 lands, which has hurt him earlier in this tournament. Oh, the frailty on the Anomalion is definitely a beating. Uh, Augur would have wanted those counters. And the Strike from Shadows. Okay, so suddenly, Blues, the Honorless Offering that Blues cast last turn is coming in clutch. Um, and a Shadowban console. Okay, so suddenly, whereas Augur had just stabilized the board, Blues has now taken it back over, which is huge. Augur's taking that hit, doesn't want to give up on her mana base. The thing I was saying is, drawing 5 lands in an 18 land deck is pretty unfortunate. Um, on the other hand, though the Shikai Remnants have been doing a lot of work, as will the Shadowband console, I imagine. The fact that Blues can keep using the same threats over and over and over again is the main thing that's helping him keep up with this Mapumo. But other than Mapumo, Augur hasn't really found any sources of sustained card advantage or ways of pulling ahead in the mid range race. Um, the strategy of having big beefy creatures was working well until it stopped working. um, Now it'll be interesting to see how this goes from here. And this is just game one, so of course, since these are GP tournaments, all events at MSEM are best of three, and both players have some pretty spicy sideboard tech. So I'll be excited to see that in action. I don't know if we know the rest of the contents of Augur's hand. Um, yeah, we. Oh, there's a second Ayala's Concord. Is the only one that we haven't seen yet. That's what's about to be cast here. Mapumu sniping off another Shikai Revenant. And finds a Gathering the Gang. Okay, this is interesting. So Gathering the Gang means that if Augur has sources of plus and plus, train creatures into each other, which will be incredibly useful. But they also do need to have the initial sources of plus and plus one counters. Ambitious Necromancer in BluesEclipse's deck is kind of a nice way of recurring the creatures that you are sacrificing for value. The deck doesn't have that many. Oh, and all of them are going crashing in at Mapumo. It'll be very interesting to see if Augur is going to chump block one of them. Oh no, sorry, only these two that got that enter tap. Okay, so Mapumo going to 2 is not the end of the world. Mapumo dying would be worth trading a mana ascetic for, I imagine. I think the best Augur would be playing a Katie of Olin and just putting a plus and plus one counter on each mana ascetic and tutoring up 2 things. Other than that, Anomalion's good. Finding a Slawfield Overseer from here, or a third Anomalion, I don't even remember if the deck runs that many, could be very useful. Ours looking through her extensive toolbox. That's one of the things about playing these mid-rangey toolboxy decks is when you have a decision to make with a card, the gang, you have to think for a while. It's the importance of committing all your lines to memory. Blues is out of cards in hand. So, notably, right now, Blues only has the resources of these 2 Shikai Revenants, the Shadowban console, another Shikai Revenant in the graveyard, and the Ambitious Necromancer. So, Blues wants to find another source of card advantage or reach to try to pull this game together. The second Anomalion coming down here is kind of frustrating. I don't think Augur runs a full playset of Anomalions. So from here we might see a Slawfield Overseer, since Augur can then cast it off these mana ascetics. No, Scion of Storms. Okay, this card is very terrifying. So the way Scions are kind of the big mid-range top-end tools that only this GP we're starting to really see in action. And this means that if Augur can untap, play Scion of Storms and has a Plains, this game just immediately gets outside of Blues' reach because that's, 11 power, 6 of it with flying, all of it with vigilance. Undeparted Evangel lands. In that meantime, Mapumo sniped off another creature, which was one of Blues' few sources of card advantage. And Blues is sitting here with a bunch of 2 power creatures, which are good, but kind of look silly in the face of these double anomalions. Blues could ship in with these 3, but 2 of them would just eat it, and Blues would only get in 2 damage. And Augur looks like they're stabilizing at the 11 life they have. I'll be curious where they go. Okay, so just going at face. Um, Augur probably, yeah, is going to just pick up the Shikai Revenants because Shadowband Console can recur this turn, whereas Shikai Revenants dying means they won't be in action until not next turn, but the following turn. But Blues is going to pick up all 3 of these. Also worth noting that Blues can just pay green, white, and 1 to permute and remove counters from anomalies, putting it on something else and triggering Gathering the Gang again. So Gathering the Gang plus these anomalies is just such a powerful grind engine for mid-range. One thing that's been really fascinating this GP is we have multiple different mid-range decks, all with different engines at the core of them. And Scion of Storms lands off a swamp, so unfortunately does not have the immediate follow-up of a Plains to really just put this game in the dirt. Um, but that's still 8 power on the field, and Blues has already started to burn through removal spells and doesn't have that much left in hand. Since the Departed Evangel can't block, oh, don't even need to correct. Um, yeah, I'm not sure how Blues gets out of this, since Blues just put himself dead on board to the Elemental plus Mapumo, so needs to remove one or both of them. Yep, game 2. All right. Um. So in game 2, let's see what we can expect to see. And let's go back to Lackey. Both players have decided who's going to be on the play. Blues is on the play. So Augur's up a game. We'll see how this one goes. The kind of ideal start for both players. Blues wants to be leading on a Departed Evangel, probably, and Augur wants to be leading on a Mana Dork. Blues taking the mulligan, which is understandable and reasonable. Um, can afford to try to find a better hand. Alright, so Augur's keeping a 7, Blues is keeping a 6, and Blues doesn't have a threat on 1, which makes me very interested as what this hand contains. It might have a Menin pack, since Blues' deck has a lot of turn 1. No, okay, so Blues just didn't have a 1-drop, which again, pretty surprising given that Blues' deck is largely made up of 1-drops. Also not a turn 2 play. Okay, that's kind of interesting. So maybe this hand just has the kind of good grindy top end that Blues is looking for, and Blues is not going to try to rush down Augur. I feel like a slow start definitely favors Augur in this matchup, so I'll be interested to see how Blues proves me wrong. Turn 2 playing a Slawfield Overseer. This card's really interesting because it helps make your Mana Dorks into threats in the late game, and obviously provides an insane engine with Gathering the Gang. At Augur's end step, here comes in the Menin pack that we were pretty sure Blues had. Let's see if an Agonizing Punishment can land, because Menin pack plus Agonizing Punishment is a very effective strategy in terms of forcing your opponent to discard a card, then be tormented 3 times. Can really hurt their game plan. Just cracking in with the 1/1 right now. Augur can't block this turn, but will be able to starting next turn. Blues shipping the turn back to Augur. Holding up mana like this makes me suspect that Blues kept a more interactive hand, which is very interesting because that means that Blues, when sideboarding, felt that he needed to be more interactive in order to win this matchup. Yep, in response, the trigger is going to Violent Rapture to kill both creatures, get 2 petals, force Augur to discard card, So that's the reason to hold the mana up there. Augur's still gonna get a green mana and can play a 3-drop, but Blue's probably fairly happy about that. And Augur discards a swamp. Okay. Sorry, can actually play a 4-drop. I forgot that Augur still has a land drop to play. Not a very blistering start to this game, but very interesting to see how the players are jockeying for position. Okay, so Chi is a fairly scary card on this board state, and Anomalion just kind of makes this more frustrating. Um, Alright, another Men Impact lands. That'll be actually kind of nice versus the Chi. Whereas Chi can swing into this, but it doesn't feel nearly as good since cashing in your 2-drop and a card to make a 4/4, but you also lose a card. It's technically an even trade, but it feels bad. Blues once again managing to find a 4th land. One of the games earlier in this tournament, Blues was having a lot of trouble drawing lands, and in this game, Blues is drawing more lands than he would like to, which is usually why I, as a player, add multiple utility lands to my decks, because even when you flood out, at least you're flooding out into kind of pseudo spells, and it means you can afford to run slightly more lands, so you get flooded less often. Or, sorry, you get screwed less often. These are some pro strats. Right, 3-drop, is this going to be Performer? Yeah, Performer of Ambition. This card's pretty absurd. So it's a 3/3 that when it attacks, each player discards card, and then if a player has no cards in hand, which Blues will by the time this card attacks, it flips into a Lord of Extinction effectively, which on this board state would only be a 6/6, so that's not as absurd. Um, but you can also sacrifice creatures to give it indestructible and lifelink, which is huge in these aggro races. And this 3/3 makes attacking in with Chile even less appealing. Ayala's Concord probably finds Mapumo, which will then exile Performer. At least I think that would be the line. Yep. Ayala's Concord also giving Augur a lot of different options in terms of toolboxing. This is a new card from Survive the Night, and if you build your deck correctly, it can find you threats, it can technically ramp you, it can also provide answers. It does everything you want it to do. Uh, Unfortunately, the Motley, I think, is flavor text on this card. It's very difficult to achieve, but it's very powerful if you do so. It can just immediately close the door on aggro. Trading Chile for Men Impact. Augur is now empty-handed, but has a Planeswalker, a 4/4 demon that regrows things, and an Anomalion on board. So I think Augur is currently pretty far ahead here. I'll be curious what the 2 remaining cards that Blues has are. I think the best thing is probably like a Performer of Ambition as one of them. I'm not sure what the second one would want to be. Maybe Shadowband Console. Or Strike from Shadows also be nice. Alright, is going to banish Mapumo. So this is going to exile Mapumo and then also exile all the other copies that Augur has left in deck. Which is powerful. That'll hit 2 or 3 cards and answers a onboard threat that you really need to answer. But it doesn't pull Blues ahead. It just pulls Blues closer to parity. So this last card is going to probably have to be a doozy. Because if Blues doesn't answer this demon or doesn't produce a blocker, this game is going to start looking pretty over. Because if this demon hits and recurs a Chile or the Ayala's Concord or something similar, it's going to become a nightmare very quickly. One more swamp, and a Shikai Revenant is the last card. So this will not be able to block, which means Augur's going to be able to slam in for 7 damage and pick up a card. So even without knowing what the last card in Augur's hand now is, things are starting to get kind of grim. I imagine Augur is currently looking through her graveyard and trying to figure out what she wants to regrow, or trying to figure out like what the optimal targets are for the tutors, which, as I mentioned, is one of the difficulties of playing decks like this Abzan deck. Alright, goes in for 7, and the demon is going to recur. Ayala's Concord, as expected. So in post main, the Ayala's Concord is gonna pop off and maybe find a Katie. Okay, so fetches with a Wayfarer Shrine. Um, Looks like just doing that mostly for the sake of only having to search once, which, good quality of life decision. I think Katie Avalon then. Oh, Merciful Euroda also works. That locks down this board. It provides another 4 power, but it's flying, unlike Katie, which is 4 ground power. Yep, that makes sense. That makes sense. And Blue's going to scoop it up here. Um, these were pretty one-sided games, unfortunately. Augur's deck is really good at beating up on these kind of lower to the ground grindy decks, since it's so good at stabilizing and gets set up very quickly. Thank you all for tuning in, and enjoy the rest of the Grand Prix.